Welcome to today's podcast. I'm your host, Greg Jameson. And if you happen to be watching this podcast as well as listening to it, you can see that I've got a guest on here today. His name is Adam Hommey, and Adam and I met a few weeks ago, I guess, at this point, where I was actually a guest on Adam's podcast, and we both thought it would be great to have him come and be on my podcast as well. So welcome, Adam. Glad to have you here today.
Greg, I've actually been following what you've been doing for a couple years now, and I really like the message of your podcast. I met some of your guests, and they've all raved about it. So I'm excited and honored to have the opportunity to serve your audience as well.
Awesome. Well, as you know, some of the guests on my podcast have been people that I have looked up to for years. And one of the reasons I actually started doing my podcast was that very reason. It was like, I would really like to have the opportunity to talk to these people. And the best way I know to do that is to have some kind of a stage where they will come and happily share their thoughts with me. And it has worked out that it has been a great networking effect because of that.
Yep. As I like to say, launching and hosting your podcast becomes your key networking, client attraction, and celebrity expert branding tool. How often do we attempt to reach out to people by sending them emails or putting something in their direct messages where basically on their end it's going to look like a sales pitch? Now imagine you replace all of that. You can actually contact somebody cold by saying, hey, I have this podcast. It's about X. Keep it to a sentence fragment. I'd love to have you on as a guest. Your yes rate goes way up just off of that, because folks who otherwise would look at you asking for a conversation with them as, oh, here comes Greg Jameson. He wants to pick my brain. All that's gone now, and it's been replaced with, oh, check out this Greg Jameson guy. He wants to give me some profile. I'm happy to help him.
Yeah, so let's take a step back and make sure that anyone listening to this today has a good idea of who Adam Hommey is.
So I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. I've been an entrepreneur for almost 20 years. I've been involved in online marketing from various different angles. I had a web development firm for 5 years. I had a website conversion consulting firm back when that was really a separate discipline. Then there was a 3-year period where I didn't really know what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I continued to serve private clients. And then I also, by hosting my own weekly podcast, the Business Creators Radio Show, which is one of the longest continuously running weekly entrepreneurial podcasts on the air today, I was still able to make 52 great connections a year, and some of those turned into deals. Around 2019, I decided to really focus on podcasting itself. So I started an agency that provides services for podcasters and guests. And that evolved into what's now known as the Podcast Reach System, which is my own unique modality for working with entrepreneurs, business creators, and other creatives to launch and host a podcast that opens conversations that lead to closed deals.
Okay, and so today you are focusing really, it seems like, a lot on helping entrepreneurs start their own podcast and or get on other people's podcasts. So tell us a little bit about what that involves. How, if I'm a newbie and I've got, say, an e-commerce shop that sells cupcakes, why do I want to have a podcast, and how do I get started?
Well, one of the things, and this is what we think of as flying under the radar, is every single person you interview could become buyers for your cupcakes. In fact, we have some prospects right now who have bakeries who are thinking about starting podcasts because they view it as an opportunity to reach not only individual consumers, but also meeting planners who need to purchase spreads for conferences, potential restaurateurs who need to have a new option in their lineup so they can use their cupcakes, and also entrepreneurs who want to gift their customers. And a great way to nurture the relationship with a prospect is send them a cupcake. I agree that if I was having an ongoing conversation with somebody and they thought, hey, just thinking about you, here's a cupcake, I'd be thinking about them. There's three things right there. Now, in the case of somebody who has a retail store, here's what you want to think about. You want to think about who could be a buyer for these products. Who has an outlet through which I could sell the products? Maybe perhaps they become my affiliate, or they feature me on a webinar or in their seminar or something like that, where I have the opportunity to share a presentation that leads to that offer. Where can I get on a podcast where my potential audience may be watching and listening, and then come back to my website and discover my products? So those are three things just right off the top.
Okay. And I totally agree with everything that you said here. Now, the other thing, obviously, that we started out talking about is just being able to get in front of some people that you may not have otherwise been able to get in front of because of the very fact that you have a podcast.
Yes.
But all that's fine and good. But the real question that a lot of people are going to have is, okay, so that's great. So, I now have been able to interview Mrs. Fields on my baking podcast, and that was great. I can now say that I know Mrs. Fields, but the bigger question for me is, how do I really make money by doing this? You and I are talking now, and we're just having a conversation. We aren't trying to sell anybody anything, but I'm a bakery, for crying out loud, and I want to sell people my cupcakes. How do I do that?
Well, I've given you three examples right there of conversations that you can open. Now, here's the secret magic that underlies using podcasting as a networking and client attraction tool is you need to invite the person somehow. And what are two common ways to do that? Email to a certain degree, but more and more we're seeing it done through direct messaging on platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, and I'm seeing more and more of it on Instagram and Clubhouse. Once you open that private room, that room stays open. Now, Greg, you are pretty big on social media yourself. I know you're on various different platforms. Let's say you went into your direct messages and you found a conversation that was 6 months old, and you opened that window and started typing in it. Would that really seem weird to the other person?
I'm sure it would.
Maybe, but maybe not. And here's the reason why. Think of why introverts like myself prefer textual conversation, whether it's texting on a phone or texting through a messenger app versus the phone ringing. Is the phone rings, that's an alert. Oh, I got to stop everything. Or even if I'm not going to answer it, now my concentration's been dinged. I got to wait for it to stop ringing so I can start using my phone for something other than phone calls again, whatever. A textual conversation sits there and politely waits. So it doesn't have to be synchronous. Once you have that conversation open, that conversation's open. Once you've had that conversation with that person through your podcast where you've established a relationship, now the door is wide open to say, hey, I'm having a sale, selling Baker's Dozens on my cupcakes. Want in? Or right now for Black Friday, we are selling the green cupcakes. Just type Black Friday for a 20% discount. You already have the relationship. It's now easier to make those pitches and be heard over everybody else who's making those pitches. That's just one very small example. For an entrepreneurial type, now that we've interviewed somebody on the podcast, a message like, hey, I'm doing a Facebook challenge next week. You want in? Sounds a lot different because we know each other. We've had a conversation. We have a relationship than me friend requesting you, you say yes, and immediately I'm blasting you with this pitch.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that is definitely the case with what you're saying there is that once you have somebody on your podcast, it's not something where you are communicating with them necessarily every single week like you do when you're blasting out emails to your customers because you're having a sale or whatever.
Yeah.
I know that just today, I reached out to someone, he was on my podcast probably 18 months ago, but I had an idea that I wanted to share with him because I thought it was something that the two of us could work on together. And he responded back to me within like 5 minutes.
That's probably why, because you already had an open conversation going. What you may or may not recall, Greg, is that even before you interviewed on my podcast a few weeks ago, you and I had been in touch before. I did a pilot of a podcast booking agency in 2019. I placed 2 people on your show. You dealt with me directly for one of the conversations, and you dealt with my assistant in Panama to actually handle logistics getting to people on the show. So I had already led with reciprocity with you. You were a familiar face by the time you showed up on my Everything Podcasting doorstep. In fact, you're one of the people I hoped would show up because you and I had connected through social media, and I've been hoping to speak with you some more. So you were already on my mind just because we had that initial connection.
Okay.
So imagine how that plays on the minds of folks where you've interviewed them already and you've already put reciprocity on the table and given them a platform that they can benefit from.
Right. So let's actually take what you just said there, and let me ask you a question about that too. And that is how you actually find people to be on your podcast. Now, it may be that you have some very specific people that you want on your podcast. Maybe you really do want Mrs. Fields to show up on your podcast. And so you need to find some way of reaching her. The other is what you were saying, through directories or whatever. What is the best way you found to actually reach people to say, hey, I want you to be on my podcast?
There's no one best way, but let me give you a couple things. With our podcast reach system, one of the things we have our clients work through as they're preparing to launch their show is to do 3 avatars: an avatar of themselves, their listener, and their guest, to gain 3 different perspectives on who's going to be involved in this triangular conversation. Then, using that data, they draw up a list of 20 people that they would like to have on their show, who the person is, why they want to connect with them, and what benefit they feel that would be for their show. Now, some of the considerations are, who would you like to have as a client? Whose client might you want to become? Is there a stage you'd like to speak on? Is there another show that you would like to be on? Do they know somebody and you could get an introduction? There are many different ways to consider that, but it all comes down to having your own show as a portal to introduce the conversation. After I started my Business Creators Radio show, about 6 months in, I had my first, what I guess you would call true celebrity guest, which was Larry Winget, the Pitbull Personal Development. Now, how did I get Larry Winget on my show? My production manager has a friend who's friends with Larry's wife. And one day, my production manager, I guess she just wanted to impress me or something. She said, hey, have you ever thought about having Larry Winget on your show? And I said, hey, you can get me Larry Winget. That would be the crowning achievement for my year here. So, and I just forgot about it because I thought maybe she was just blowing smoke or something. 30 minutes later, she Skypes me again. She says, check your email. Right there, lined up nice and neat in my email, was the application to be on my show filled out by Larry Winget's assistants, followed by the chain of emails with the template saying, yes, we'd like to have Larry, go ahead and have him schedule, followed by, here's the date and time you will record your interview with Larry. Now, I think I got that because I had something to offer him, which was an interview, an opportunity for exposure. And if I had said, hey, give me 5 minutes with Larry so I could ask him a couple questions, like, well, do you think he really wants his brain picked? I don't know. I mean, I know him fairly well, but I'm not sure his overall opinions of brain pickers. But the fact that I had something to offer him to begin with was beneficial. Now, it benefited him as well because I ended up attending 3 of his seminars here in Las Vegas. So 3 times he got ticket purchases for me. Plus I bought books, plus I've referred people. So simply by taking time to help me by being on my podcast and allow me to help him by giving some additional exposure, that led directly to monetization for him. And how hard is it really to be a podcast guest, especially when you're a pro like Larry is? You're close to your topic, you're at the center of your brilliance and your passion, and you can go on anytime and you're ready to go. And it's fun.
Yep. And I think that the benefit that you were saying there really is that you had something to offer him. And so that's something that people need as a big takeaway from our conversation here today, is that you are going to offer them something. And what you're offering them is basically exposure to your audience. And your audience, guess what? It doesn't have to be big. You may only have a dozen people in your audience, but if the person that you're asking to show up as a guest on your show would like to really be in touch with your audience, because that's their target audience as well, it's probably worth their time to go ahead and do it, because the interview in a podcast lives on, unlike a regular radio show or whatever, where it's on the airways and then it's gone. A podcast is something that lives on forever, and it's not just going to be those 12 people that hear it. It's going to be something that it's got a life for years afterwards.
Let me tell you another story, and this is one of my own greatest hits. I had somebody show up on my scheduling app at schedulewithadam.com one day saying that they heard me on a podcast and wanted to speak with me because they thought I could be a great addition to the launch team for their startup. So we had the conversation, and that turned into a $30,000 deal very quickly. And they've been a client of mine for 5 years now. So here's what I don't know. I don't know for sure whether they tuned into my podcast or somebody else's. And I don't know what I said that made them feel that it was worth it to have a conversation with me. I just know that somewhere I spoke on a podcast that led to something showing up on my calendar that turned into one of my favorite client relationships of all time, and a very lucrative one for both me and that client because of our work together. Now, she and I don't completely agree to this day on exactly how the connection was made. She swears that she was referred to me by somebody who knows me, but she can't tell me who that was. What I think happened when I put all of the various pieces of this together is she heard me on somebody else's show. And the offer I made was that people could go to www.schedulewithadam.com and book 15 minutes with me to discuss things further. And the host was probably really saccharine and sweet in how they really laid on about what a great gift this is, what a great opportunity it is, and what a great guy Adam is. And he's really somebody who can move your business forward. I wholeheartedly recommend you take him up on his opportunity. I think that's what the referral was.
Okay, so
the point I want to make here is the beauty part of this, and I'm sorry, the beauty part of this, I just want to really emphasize this in a pattern interrupting sort of way so your audience catches it, is the best part is the results sometimes show up when you weren't even expecting them. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, and it might be a couple years later even.
Yeah.
So that leads to two other questions here. One is, how easy is it really to start a podcast?
And you get done if you're being intentional and thoughtful about it, and you have somebody who can work with you to create the framework and do it in an efficient way, you can be up and running in 60 days. I mean, to really do it right. I mean, yeah, you can record a file and go to Podbean or Anchor and upload it and say, look at me, I have a podcast. But if you're looking to actually build a dedicated media portal and be intentional with how you do your avatars, how you brand it, how you design it, who you reach out to, how you structure your initial launch when you take it out to the world, you can certainly achieve that in about 60 days. And the reason I say that is because it's going to open up a new level of creativity for you that may even inspire new things you can do with your business in the process. We found this again and again and again. Plus, since you're going to be interviewing folks, you're just going to need some turnaround to get those interviews scheduled and processed.
Okay, and explain the difference, I guess, here between doing what it is that you and I've been doing here with podcasts versus somebody just doing a Facebook Live or a YouTube Live.
The beauty part about Facebook Lives and YouTube Lives is if you do those intentionally, where you know that you're going to keep this piece of it, but you're going to cut off this, and then put different bumpers on it, you can take that same content and make it a podcast episode. In fact, with one of my clients, I'm going to be coming on board as a co-host of their podcast. And my role is going to be to process some of their old webinar recordings and repurpose them as podcast episodes, where my role is going to be, I'm going to introduce the content as the host. And it's sort of like a trip down memory lane, something along those lines. We're still working out the exact details of what it's going to be. It also works the other way around. If you have a podcast, you can also repurpose those episodes as Facebook videos, as YouTube videos. In fact, we recommend the latter, because here's what's really cool about having a YouTube channel. Most devices, whether they're Windows, Android, Apple, whatever, doesn't matter, have some connection to a Google account. In most cases, the end user will use the same Google account for their YouTube as they use for their Gmail. By default, the little thing that dings whenever a new episode is or a new video is added to a channel they subscribe to is turned on, and many people don't know how to turn it off. So they'll get alerts every time you put up a new episode.
Okay, so one
Same
final.
with Facebook, by the way, too, because even if you schedule them as premieres, like if I load it today and it's supposed to go live on Monday when it starts streaming, they'll get the little red dot up in their Facebook. It says the so-and-so's new episode is playing live now. Come join us.
Yeah, and repurposing obviously is huge. In fact, as you know, that's what we're doing here today, that this is going to be posted into a blog post as well. So we'll have this show up on YouTube. We'll have it show up on my podcast feed. It'll show up in the blog feed. Repurposing is huge. But now let's look at one other thing here, and that is that I am running a business. I'm baking cupcakes. I don't really have time to be doing a podcast every week, but what you've talked about here is really intriguing to me. How do I go about being a guest on other people's podcasts where I don't have to do the work? I just have to show up and talk about my cupcakes.
Okay, if you don't want to host your own show, even though I continue to argue that hosting your own show is the best way to get hosted on other people's shows, then here's what I recommend. Be very intentional and clear about your pitches, because there are more available guests than there are shows or episodes to feature them. As a host myself, I am inundated with requests for my podcasts. I cannot possibly interview them all. I don't need to hear that, oh, I listened to your podcast and I think it's great. I'm an avid fan and I love this particular episode. By the way, my name is Greg Jameson. I'm blah, 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 9 paragraphs. And I can speak on the following topics, A, B, C, D, and E. If you'd like to have a conversation about how I could potentially add value to your show, please let me know. No. Hi, my name is Greg Jameson. I'd like to be on your show. Here's my topic. Here's my one sheet. If you're interested, let me know. If not, either way, let me know how to get started. I mean, Word is slightly more clean than that because I'm going a little bit extemporaneous here. In fact, I have a template for that. If somebody wants to contact me, I'll give it to them. But it's real simple. You focus on 4 things: who I am, the value I add, here's my topic. If you're interested, how do I get started? Let me know either way.
Yeah, I think it's huge for people to understand that if you want to be on somebody else's show, you really do have to have something where you're going to add value to that person's audience. And
right, I'll give you one other tactic. There are a proliferation of Facebook groups out there that are specifically about host guest exchanges. Get in some of those, you'll find some opportunities.
Yeah. So what I was alluding to here is things like if you've written a book, if you've been on other people's podcasts, if you have won an award, whatever it might be, you've got some credentials that you can go to Adam and you can say, not only I want to be on your podcast and here's what I can offer, but this is why you really ought to talk to me.
Exactly. You encapsulate that in your one sheet. And there's one other mindset thing. When you have an opportunity to be on a podcast, you say, unless it is just so far away from your topic that there's no possible way you could comment on it, your answer is yes. Like I've guested on podcasts, even though my primary thing is helping people launch their podcasts. I've been a guest on shows about hypnotherapy, about contacting spirits from the dead. I've done one on what it means to truly be a man, because these are things that I'm interested in and things I have something to say about. And when people see that I'm here, and I'm also here, and I'm also here, that's just more opportunities for people to find me. And hey, there could be somebody who's interested in discovering their manhood, who wants to express it by launching a podcast. Why would I not take up on that opportunity?
Totally agree.
So unless it's just way off topic, or there's a conflict of interest, or just something that just makes it an absolute no way in hell in this lifetime, the answer is yes. And if you use tactics like seed-based marketing and neurolinguistic programming, even if you're on an off topic or a change of pace type interview, you can still get a bit of your branding in so people understand the value you bring. So I can talk about podcasting on non-podcasting topics.
Okay, now, one final thing that seems like most podcasts kind of do a wrap up at the end where they ask the guest how the listeners can stay in touch with them, and or if you've got anything that you want to provide to them.
Sure.
I'm going to leave that kind of open-ended for you to talk about that and to direct people to
Okay.
wherever you want to direct them to.
Sure, Greg. And with your permission, I'd like to give 2 simple resources. Just depends on where the person is in their journey. Do I have your permission to do that?
Absolutely. Go
Okay.
for it.
If you're somebody who either is interested in podcasting or already involved in it, what you're looking for is a community to support you, and a place to get questions answered, and a place to potentially do host guest exchanges and help people see more of the brilliance and passion you bring to the world, join us in our Facebook group. You go to www, and pay attention closely, www.everythingpodcasting.group. Everythingpodcasting.group. Not .com, because it's being held hostage by a broker. If you are at the point in your journey where you're seriously considering launching your podcast, then I encourage you to visit my website at www.thereachsystem.com. And there, you'll find a web page that explains the Reach system in detail, and you'll find a free training option where you can watch a video that says substantially the same thing as the web page does, but it gives you that choice, whether you want to watch and listen or read. So I cover both modalities. So everythingpodcasting.group for the group, thereachsystem.com for the website.
Very good. And with that, we will wrap up. And I just want to say a big thanks to Adam for being with us here today and for sharing all these $1 million nuggets with us. I think that it would be a really good thing for anyone listening to this or reading the blog post to really take Adam up on his offers. Go to his sites there. I'll put those in the notes as well. And just want to say thanks again, Adam.
Thank you, Greg. And as I said, always an honor to do what I can to help somebody move the needle forward. And I appreciate the opportunity.